how did it make you feel like after the situation, knowing that something like that went down for like y'all family, and like you see the togetherness of Wilson, like y'all being in one like that, and somebody else, somebody that was already, you know what I'm saying?
We ain't gonna really talk too much about it, but this is what I'll say. I'm from Wilson Avenue. Well, brother talking about that, I come from the standard. What's up? We gonna uphold that standard forever. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Know what's up and who I am.
That's how we gonna wrap this section up.
What you just heard was a woman trying to lift the spirits of mourners at a funeral on October 28, 2022. She's talking about 20-year-old John Hornezis Jr., a Pittsburgh kid who loved basketball and had his whole life ahead of him. But in less than 5 minutes, gunfire would erupt outside Destiny of Faith Church, turning that funeral into a war zone. 6 people would be shot, a horse would be wounded, and the entire terrifying ordeal would be captured on live stream for the world to see.
Allegheny Elementary School, Allegheny Middle School, and Alderdice High School.
And those are mourners diving for cover at a funeral. Yes, this was a shooting at a funeral. It happened in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Authorities say that 2 gunmen opened fire at this event from the outside of the Destiny of Faith Church, which is on Pittsburgh's north side. This apparently happened just after noon. The funeral was for a 20-year-old man who had been shot to death in an incident 2 weeks earlier. Police say that 2 gunmen, they believe, opened fire, and that a shot spotter system, which is an audio system used by police to track gunshots, initially reported 5 shots fired in the block of this church, and then another 15 shots. And then there were multiple reports that started flooding into police of people at this funeral who had been shot and injured.
But before we get to those terrifying moments inside that church, you need to understand what led to this funeral in the first place. On October 15, 2022, around 10 p.m., emergency dispatchers in Pittsburgh's North Side received calls about a shooting near a Sunoco gas station on Cedar Avenue. When officers arrived at the scene, they found 3 people who had been shot. 2 women were discovered at a bus stop near the intersection of Cedar Avenue and East Ohio Street. A young man was found in a nearby park, and at least 20 shots had been fired.
Now, it was at the funeral for John Hornezis when gunfire erupted again in Brighton Heights. KDKA has now obtained the surveillance video that shows the chaos outside Destiny of Faith Church. 6 people were wounded in that crime. KDKA's Jennifer Barrasso spent the day talking with some of those victims. She's live now with the very latest information on that. Jen.
Yeah, Kim, I talked to 3 of the 6 victims and a family member of another victim. They're all recovering physically, but the story is the same in all of the cases. They tell me, Jen, I'm too afraid to talk on camera. I fear retaliation. One person told me, I didn't see anything and I didn't hear anything. In this video, you can clearly see the terrifying moments after gunfire erupted outside Destiny of Faith Church during the funeral for John Hornezis, who was recently killed in a gun battle on the north side. 2 suspects dressed in black wearing masks started shooting at the lawn on the north side of the church at Benton Avenue towards people at the front doors and in the vestibule of the church. One of the suspects ran towards the church entrance and continued shooting towards the victims. Then people start running. A bullet fragment hit one of the horses that brought the casket. Then a woman who was shot struggles to make her way into the church. KDK has learned a bullet hit her in the leg, foot, and hand. A man who knows her tells me the family is too afraid to talk, fearing retaliation, saying she didn't see anything or hear anything. Another victim, a 24-year-old man shot in the foot, tells me he ran and kept running until he was safe. Right now, he's at home recovering. He tells me it's hard living in the streets and surviving. A 20-year-old, also afraid, thanked me for checking in, telling me there's a lot of fear.
Nobody likes to live in fear. That's the community that we're in. Like, you know, sometimes it's just life. Like, it's just life.
Jason Westmoreland works at Pittsburgh Fish and Chicken on Benton Avenue across from the church and heard dozens of shots.
Outrageous. It was sad. I feel bad for the family, but it's just heartbreaking.
Hours after the shooting, police arrested and charged Sean Davis and Hezekiah Nixon. Through cameras, detectives identified the suspect vehicle and found them on the McKees Rocks Bridge. They are both known to law enforcement and have prior criminal records. Police believe they targeted the funeral over an ongoing turf battle connected to the earlier shooting on Cedar Avenue that killed Hernandez.
You live what you live, you learn what you learn, and sometimes ain't no going back.
Still, Jason Westmoreland says something needs to change.
As people, as individuals, got to make better choices. And if we don't choose to do that, ain't nothing's gonna happen. Just think before you react. Use your head. You got a brain.
The victims were identified as John Hornezis Jr., 33-year-old Jacqueline Mahalik, and 59-year-old Betty Jean Averett. Betty was pronounced dead at the scene. John and Jacqueline were rushed to Allegheny General Hospital, which was just 1 block away. But despite the quick response, both died within an hour of arrival. A fourth person, a 21-year-old man, was shot in the leg but survived. Betty Averett was a mother of 6 and grandmother of 11, whose daughter described her as beautiful inside and out with one of the brightest smiles. Betty loved playing the card game Tonk and called herself Beautiful Brown Betty. She was just waiting for a bus when the gunfire erupted around her. Jacqueline Mahalik was the mother of 4 children, 8-year-old Kaysen, 7-year-old London, 2-year-old Cerise, and 11-year-old Kelani. Her family described her as an amazing, loving, and beautiful person all around. She was on her way to work as a waitress at True Food Manufacturing when she became an innocent victim of violence that had nothing to do with her.
I don't know who did this, but whoever did this, let me tell you something. God gonna have his way with you because there was no reason for this to happen today.
The shooting prompted a massive police response. Officers from all over raced to the Destiny of Faith Church on Brighton Avenue. This is, of course, just the latest in a string of violent incidents in the city. In fact, that funeral was being held for a 20-year-old man who had been shot and killed in another mass shooting on the north side just 12 days ago.
Police believe some type of neighborhood feud is fueling this violence. Police say 6 people were hurt in this shooting. 1 person was in critical condition at Allegheny General Hospital but has been upgraded to stable. 5 others are also in stable condition. 1 of them was taken to Children's Hospital. KDKA's Andy Sheehan has been speaking with investigators and has the latest now on the investigation. Andy.
Christine, youth gun violence, kids with guns and ready to use them. It's become an epidemic in Pittsburgh and the region. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Many times it involves rival groups, not organized gangs, but rival groups organized around turf or drugs that get into these disputes. There's a shooting incident, there's retaliation, and there's retaliation against that. It started 2 weeks ago with a shooting on the north side outside of Sunoco Station in which this young man and 2 women victims, innocent bystanders, were killed. There appears to be a retaliatory action last night in the Spring Hill neighborhood, and now this shooting today outside of this young man's funeral. A funeral for the victim of gun violence, itself disrupted by gunfire. A burst of 5 rounds, followed by 15 more. In their wake, 6 people are wounded. Suspected mourners of 20-year-old John Hornezis, killed last week in a gun battle outside the Sunoco station on the north side.
And then there was John Hornezis Jr., who was born on January 7, 2002. He was a young man who loved sports from the time he was 5 years old and played football for the North Shore Stallions and remained loyal to that team throughout his childhood. John loved basketball and played at the Pittsburgh Project, Urban Impact, and through his school years at Allegheny Elementary, Allegheny Middle School, and Pittsburgh Alderdice High School, where he graduated in 2020. After graduation, John was pursuing a career in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning at the Community College of Allegheny County, and he was also working toward his commercial driver's license at All-State Career School. Police quickly determined that John was likely the target of the shooting and that Betty and Jacqueline were innocent bystanders caught in crossfire. According to investigators, an altercation broke out in the gas station parking lot that escalated into gunfire. Surveillance footage showed that John and his associates were firing at a passing SUV when the occupants of that vehicle returned fire, tragically striking the two women at the bus stop and killing John as well.
Commander, we believe this is related to the shooting outside the Sunoco station, the funeral for John Hornizes, the 20-year-old today.
It was his funeral that was taking place. As far as any of the relationships or what might have precipitated this shooting is still under investigation at this time.
Police now believe they have a turf war raging between rival groups that squared off that night at the Sunoco station. Police sources tell me those connected to the funeral victim fired shots at rivals last night in the Spring Hill neighborhood, and today may have been the latest retaliation in an escalating war. We're seeing some sort of turf battle, some sort of gang activity, neighborhood dispute?
So obviously we believe there's a dispute going on. We're looking into that. We're going to utilize all the resources as we have been doing currently, and we'll continue to do so. There will be a strong police presence in the areas of concern that we believe are problem areas, so that we can hopefully prevent anything further from happening at this time.
Last week's shooting shocked the city for taking the lives of two innocent women victims who have been waiting for a bus. Now police are alerting the public about this raging war. Are you concerned about, and will you warn the neighborhood here on the north side about an escalation after this?
Obviously, yeah. We need to get together and coordinate all of our efforts and all the information that we have, so that anything that needs to be put out, obviously, we'll make sure that that gets put out.
But these shootings tend to go on unabated. This is a danger not only to these kids, these people themselves, but to innocent bystanders. People that were mourning today at this funeral had nothing to do with this dispute between these neighborhood groups. Commander Richard Ford putting out a warning to the north side this evening.
Police described the incident as part of a turf battle between rival groups. They linked it to gang activity and ongoing feuds in Pittsburgh's north side, including prior incidents in neighborhoods like Spring Hill. People connected to John had allegedly fired shots in the Spring Hill neighborhood the night before his funeral, suggesting that tensions were escalating rapidly. What police found particularly concerning was that this wasn't a random act of violence. This was retaliation. And if the initial shooting was retaliation for something that had happened before, then John's funeral was about to become the next flashpoint in a dangerous cycle that nobody seemed able to stop. John's mother, Tamika Hornizes, was devastated. She would later describe losing her son as the most traumatizing experience of my life. His godmother, Paige Davis, spoke publicly about the need for peace and healing, calling for the community to break the cycle of violence. But even as John's family prepared to lay him to rest, they were terrified. They knew the danger wasn't over. The family requested police protection at John's funeral because they had heard rumors and received threats. They feared that John's rivals might try something during the service. Pittsburgh police responded by assigning 2 officers to work the funeral detail at Destiny of Faith Church on Brighton Road in the Brighton Heights neighborhood. But when the day came, those officers never showed up.
Here is Pittsburgh Police Commander Richard Ford describing the scene.
When officers arrived on scene, it was determined that there was gunfire that took place outside the church, the 3700 block. There were 4 victims that were self-transported to AGH. There were also 1 additional victim that was critical, that was transported by medics.
So a total of 5 people who were shot and taken to the hospital or went to the hospital themselves. Police say that 1 other person was transported to the hospital for injuries that person sustained while scrambling to try to get out of the church and the funeral service. Police say that the 2 people who have been arrested for trying to shoot up the funeral and the church from the outside are a 19-year-old man and a 16-year-old boy. These 2 alleged gunmen face charges of criminal attempted homicide, criminal conspiracy, aggravated assault, and various firearms charges. The funeral that was taking place inside the Destiny of Faith Church was for a 20-year-old man named John Hornizes. Hornizes, 2 weeks earlier, was shot and killed at a gas station, and police said that the shooting of his funeral, or at least the shooting from the outside of the church for his funeral, well, that was targeted. And that prompted a number of reporters to ask police questions about the connections between the shooting death of Hornizes 2 weeks earlier and the shots that were fired at this church.
We're seeing some sort of turf battle, some sort of gang activity, neighborhood dispute?
So obviously, we believe there's a dispute going on. We're looking into that. We're going to utilize all the resources as we have been doing currently, and we'll continue to do so. There will be a strong police presence in the areas of concern that we believe are problem areas, so that we can hopefully, prevent anything further from happening at this time.
In terms of prevention, there is some frustration among the mourners and people who attended John Hornese's funeral because they say, at least they tell the local media, that they warned police that they were hearing rumblings that there might be an attempt to shoot up Hornese's funeral. They asked for police to be there, and there was not a squad car, there was not a police officer on the scene during the funeral, though police officers did respond very quickly once their shot spotter system tracked shots fired in that block. The hope now is that with 2 people being arrested, that perhaps this wave of violence might be tamped down. But by all accounts, the violence in Pittsburgh, the idea that you're not even safe perhaps at a funeral service in a church, well, that brings things to a new low, a new depth. And in fact, the pastor of the Destiny of Faith Church issued a statement saying, "This is probably my pastoral ministry that I've been doing for over 30 years. This has been one of the most devastating incidents of my life." And you can imagine just how on edge and frightened people are. The idea that even a funeral could be part of a retaliation or part of gang violence or part of a tit-for-tat response between warring factions in the community. It's got a lot of people very, very anxious and nervous. And again, gang activity, reckless homicides, these are not unusual for American cities. But nonetheless, a lot of people in Pittsburgh right now are extremely anxious. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for joining us. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section.
October 28, 2022 started as a day of mourning for the Horneses family. More than 100 people gathered at Destiny of Faith Church to celebrate John's life. The service was being live-streamed so that friends and family who couldn't attend in person could still participate. Inside the church, a woman was reading John's obituary, talking about his love of basketball and his bright future. Outside, mourners were gathering on the sidewalk, talking quietly, preparing for the procession. A horse and carriage had been arranged to carry John's casket. Then, at approximately 12:04 p.m., everything changed. The first shots rang out, and according to the shot spotter system, which is an audio detection system used by police to track gunfire, 5 shots were fired initially. Then, within seconds, another 15 followed. Approximately 20 to 23 rounds in total were discharged outside the church. Inside the church, the live stream captured the panic. You can hear the gunshots. You can hear people screaming. Mourners dove under pews. Children were crying. The woman who had been trying to celebrate John's life just minutes earlier was now scrambling for safety along with everyone else.
I know it's tough right now. I know that there's a lot of families and friends who are hurting right now. And I know a lot of them feel like they should do something. So I wanted to do something with you. I want you to call and tell us what you know. I need you to speak up and say something. They shot up the sanctuary today.
Outside, it was even worse. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses captured 2 individuals dressed in black approaching the church on Benton Avenue. Both were armed with weapons that had extended magazines. The footage showed the one gunman beginning to fire toward the front of the church before moving to the side. The other gunman started firing at a man standing on the sidewalk in front of the church. The man collapsed near the horse and carriage. The gunman then began chasing him while continuing to fire. Multiple people who had been standing outside the church were hit. Some were able to limp back inside. Others fell where they stood. Even the horse that was supposed to carry John's casket was struck by gunfire. When the shooting finally stopped, approximately 45 seconds after it began, 6 people had been wounded. 5 were shot directly, and a 6th person was injured while trying to escape. The victims included 4 men ages 20, 24, 27, and 66, as well as a 57-year-old woman. Another victim, whose age was not disclosed, was transported to Children's Hospital. Darnell Harris told local media that his 57-year-old niece was shot in the leg, foot, and hand. His 24-year-old nephew was also shot. One victim was initially listed in critical condition, but later upgraded to stable. By the end of the day, all 6 victims were reported to be in stable condition, though one had undergone surgery. But here's what made the situation even more infuriating for the family and the community: the absence of police protection. The absence of police protection became a major point of controversy. An internal investigation was launched, and the Citizens Police Review Board began looking into why the officers were not there as requested. For a family that had already lost a son and had specifically asked for protection because they feared retaliation, the failure of police to be there felt like a devastating betrayal. Pastor Brenda Gregg of Destiny of Faith Church was in shock. She described the shooting as a desecration of holy ground and said that in her over 30 years of pastoral ministry, this was one of the most devastating incidents she had ever experienced. But despite the trauma, Pastor Gregg vowed that the church would continue its work in the community, including planned Halloween events to foster unity and healing. Mayor Ed Gainey arrived at the scene shortly after the shooting. He was visibly shaken as he surveyed the damage along Brighton Road. Cars were riddled with bullet holes, shell casings littered the ground, and more than 60 shell casings were eventually recovered from the scene. Mayor Gainey begged the community not to retaliate. He pleaded with witnesses to come forward with information and emphasized that the violence had to stop. But his words felt hollow to many in the community who had seen this cycle play out again and again. Pittsburgh was experiencing a surge in homicides in 2022, with more than 70 killings citywide by the end of the year. Many of these killings were linked to disputes between loosely affiliated groups in neighborhoods across the North Side. But for Tamika Hornizes, none of that mattered in the moment. She had just lost her son 2 weeks earlier. Now she couldn't even mourn him in peace, and the people responsible for the shooting were still out there. Police moved quickly, and by that evening, they had made a breakthrough. Around 6 p.m., officers spotted a dark Hyundai Elantra that matched descriptions from witnesses and surveillance footage. They attempted to pull the vehicle over on the McKees Rocks Bridge. As officers approached, they saw one of the occupants throw something over the side of the bridge and into the Ohio River below. It was a gun. 2 suspects were taken into custody: 19-year-old Sean Davis from McKees Rocks and 16-year-old Hezekiah Nixon from Pittsburgh's North Side. Both were handcuffed and escorted into police headquarters. The bridge was closed for half an hour as a river rescue team and search dog attempted to retrieve the weapon that had been thrown into the water. A second gun was found on the roadway where it had fallen during the arrest. Investigators began piecing together what had happened. Surveillance video showed the 2 suspects crossing the street and approaching the church before opening fire. The footage was presented at a preliminary hearing in February 2023. Defense attorneys argued that identification was unclear due to masks and distance, but prosecutors insisted the evidence was strong enough to proceed. Search warrants were executed at Davis's home in McKees Rocks. Police recovered the clothing Davis had worn during the shooting, which matched what was seen in surveillance footage. They also found marijuana and 3 weapon magazines, and Nixon's clothing was identical to what one of the gunmen had been wearing in the surveillance video. The charges against both suspects were extensive. Davis was charged with criminal conspiracy, attempted homicide, aggravated assault, recklessly endangering another person, firearms violations, and aggravated cruelty to animals because of the horse that was shot. Nixon faced the same charges, plus additional counts for possession of a firearm by a minor and tampering with evidence. Police described the shooting as a targeted retaliation connected to the Cedar Avenue incident that had killed John Hornizes 2 weeks earlier. They believed it was part of an ongoing turf battle between rival groups in Pittsburgh's North Side, with tensions that had been building for months or even years. But the legal process moved slowly. A joint trial for Davis and Nixon was tentatively scheduled for September 2, 2025. However, before that trial could begin, Nixon decided to plead guilty. On September 2nd or 3rd, 2025, Nixon appeared before Allegheny County Commonplace Judge Kevin G. Sasanoski and pled guilty to 4 counts of aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, conspiracy, cruelty to animals, and illegal firearm possession. In exchange for his plea, he was sentenced to 11 to 22 years in state prison. That sentence would run concurrently with a 6 to 12-year sentence he was already serving for his role in an unrelated shooting in August 2022 that had killed 40-year-old Stephon Drayton. At the sentencing hearing, Tamika Hornezes was given the opportunity to speak. She described the shooting at her son's funeral as pain on top of pain. She called the shooters soulless and said she hoped they would be held fully accountable for what they had done. Deputy District Attorney Emma Shodo emphasized during the hearing that people have a right to mourn their loved ones safely. The fact that mourners at a funeral were targeted was particularly egregious. Nixon, for his part, expressed remorse, saying, "I'm very sorry for what happened." But an apology doesn't undo the trauma. It doesn't bring back the sense of safety that was shattered that day, and it doesn't change the fact that Sean Davis's case is still pending, with no confirmed trial date as of today. The broader legal outcomes from both the Cedar Avenue shooting and the funeral attack reveal a complicated web of violence and retaliation. Sharon Troutman, one of the individuals involved in the initial Cedar Avenue shootout, pleaded guilty in June 2025 to criminal conspiracy, aggravated assault, and weapons charges. He received a sentence requiring at least 8 years in state prison. Homicide charges against him had been dropped earlier in January 2023 after autopsy and ballistic evidence showed inconsistencies. Jaylone Hines, also known as Ashton Hines, who was allegedly with John Hornezes during the Cedar Avenue shooting, still faces 2 counts of homicide for the deaths of Betty Averitt and Jacqueline Mihelic. He is accused of initiating the gunfire that led to the deaths of the 2 innocent bystanders. The funeral shooting at Destiny of Faith Church was not an isolated incident. In July 2020, a similar tragedy unfolded in Chicago when 15 people were wounded in a drive-by shooting outside Rhodes Funeral Services during the funeral of another shooting victim. In that case, as in Pittsburgh, police had anticipated potential trouble but were unable to prevent the attack. No arrests were ever made in the Chicago case. These incidents highlight a disturbing pattern. Funerals, which should be sacred spaces for mourning and healing, have become targets in ongoing conflicts. The desecration of these spaces represents a new low in urban violence, and it leaves communities asking how much further things can fall. For John Hornezes Jr., his story ended far too soon. A 20-year-old with dreams of a career, a love of basketball, and a loyalty to his community became another statistic in Pittsburgh's homicide count. His mother will never get to see him graduate from college, start a career, get married, or have children of his own. The 2 innocent women who died alongside him, Betty Averitt and Jacqueline Mihelic, left behind children and grandchildren who will forever carry the trauma of their senseless deaths. What do you think about this case? Do you think the presence of the police would have prevented the shooting? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Also, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.
I believe God's pleased with you. And I thank God that we stand here today with a full house because of the love that was in this young man. And we have to lift up our heads in spite of what's going on. We must trust God. God is real. And he keeps us safe. I believe this young man is in his arms. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. He lets me rest in the meadow's grass, and he leads me beside the quiet streams. He restores my failing health, and he helps me to do what honors him the most. That's why I'm safe That's why I'm safe. I'm safe.